Philip needs a big applause. Thank you, Philip, for doing this work. So, hello, I'm Zorz. I now work for IPsec, for Internet Society, but this presentation I'm doing with my previous hat on, and I still wear this hat. I'm a CEO of Go6 Institute from Slovenia that pushed the IPv6 deployment in our country and wider much further, and we've got many IPv6 deployments ready in Slovenia now, including 3 major mobile operators and so on and so forth. So a bit about me. CEO of Slovenian Go6 Institute, now working for IPsec, big IPv6 advocate for years. I've spent more than 22 years in network operations, designing, architecting, and running big networks for telcos and ISPs. Got my hands dirty for a long time, still keeping my hands dirty despite working for IPsec. I'm running the Go6 lab. I'm running my data center, racks of equipment, running my ASN, BGP, and everything. So I keep in touch with the technology and the operations. I'm an active and contributing member of RIPE community. I did several proposals for policy changes and for BCP in RIPE. I'm also co-author of one IETF RFC, that's A+P, and frequent IPv6 flyer. I flew around the world talking about IPv6 and at different meetings around the world. So, RIPE 501 and later on 554. What is it and how it all started? So, it started in my country. I come from Slovenia. And once we had a meeting, very informal meeting, basically in a pub, with a representative of our government. And I asked him, why you are not requiring IPv6 when you are ordering the equipment over the public tenders? And he said, honestly, because we don't know how to. We have no idea how to require IPv6. And he said, can you go and write me some text that we will put into the tenders so we can require IPv6? And I said, challenge accepted. So I went home, spent a few weeks searching for if something like this exists, got some profiles, put them together, and then we put this text through our IPv6 working group in Slovenia. And then finally, Sander Stefan, one of co-chairs of Address Policy Working Group in RIPE, saw this document through a Google Translate and said, oh, this is exactly what I need for Dutch government. And he said, oh, can you please translate this to English and put it to the IPv6 working group so we can hear also if anyone else needs this. So what I did was translate it into English. Sander helped me with the translation because I'm a bit lazy. He became a co-author and we put it to the IPv6 working group that Marco is co-chairing. It was of great help. 1.5 years later, and 9 editing cycles and published drafts later, and lots of community input and lots of suggestions and lots of discussion, we came to a consensus that this is the profile that is supposed to be asked when you are buying the equipment. And this was published as RIPE 501 and translated, I think, in 17 languages around the world. It's very much used document around the world. With publishing the RIPE 501, we promised that we will improve the document because there was lots of room of improvement. But we needed something stable that governments and enterprises could use meantime. So we promised when we publish the document, we will work on it. So Mary Kekio joined us as a co-author, and we started working on the next version of the document. The success of this document is entirely lies into the community consensus and that many people being involved in shaping and commenting and discussing what's correct and what's not. There was countless cycles of one option going from mandatory to optional, and from optional back to mandatory, and back to optional, and back to mandatory, with different explanation from different people why this should be there, and why this should be there, and why this shouldn't be here, and so on and so forth. So we spent a huge amount of time and energy in getting all the input and trying to understand what the community wants. So probably you can't read it from there, but this is acknowledgement list. Look how many people actively contributed to both versions of the document. Why we did it? First, because we could. Secondly, because it removes the first speed bump in IPv6 deployment process. Because with deploying IPv6, people say, oh, so now I decided to deploy v6, but now I don't know how to buy the equipment. How do I buy the equipment? Here's the solution. Here's a document, the lowest common denominator that you should ask for when you're buying it, and is really useful and very easy to use for the procurement people in the company that never heard about word IPv6. Just copy paste, period, done. And actually governments and enterprises are using it. I will tell you later what happens. And our approach is you must require IPv6, and here is recommendation how. We are not asking you to use this document as such. You can modify it. It's intended as a template. So this was the first one, 501, requirements for ICT equipment. There is a content list, so there was requirements for supports of standards. Then was host equipment, layer 2 switch, layer 2 ISP grade layer 2 switch, router, network security equipment, and then was requirements for IPv6 support in software and requirements of the system integrator. And there was a declaration that the buyer can make the systems integrator sign that the system integrator is actually has the team and the people that actually understands IPv6 and knows how to integrate the equipment into their IPv6 network. So RIPE 554, the document that's obsoleted 501 and is improved one. Here we can see that we got a lady in a editor's team. It's Marika. So before there was just two guys, Sander and me. We just put RFCs on and said, okay, this is the list, and this is just some simple things that you should write in. We got a lady in, and she did some of the housekeeping and put some explanations in it, what is which equipment, how to use the document, and so on. So we got some order in the house. So the add-ons for the 554 are requirements for the CPE equipment, requirements for mobile devices, and requirements for load balancers. We changed a bit the requirements for IPv6 support in software and skill requirements of the systems integrator. We removed the declaration because that was too hard, because around the world different countries has different laws and requirements, so we just wrote some recommendations how to write a declaration and what to require from your systems integrator. We also have the proposed generic text for the tender initiator. That is something really generic that you should just copy paste and put into the tender whatever you're doing. So this is an example of the hosts mandatory requirements. So every part, every device type has the mandatory and optional IPv6 requirements. And this is an example of a mandatory requirements for a host. If you see these asterisks at the end of the line, this marks the RFCs and the functionalities that are tested by IPv6 Ready Logo program. So we will talk about that when we come to how to comply with the profile. And this is optional support. So mandatory support, the document says if the equipment does not comply with the mandatory support, then it's excluded from the procurement process because it does not meet the minimum requirements. With the optional support, we wrote in the recommendation for the tender initiator to put additional points when there is a tender procedure of evaluation. If you comply to some optional support, you get more points at the tender. And this is a big incentive for the vendors to implement fancy stuff from the optional support section. So more of the optional stuff that you deploy as a vendor, more points you get at the evaluation, and you have more chances to win the contract and get the money. So this is actually, we raise at the end, the money incentive to deploy as many IPv6 functionality as possible. And this is working great. As we can see, we spotted on the internet, the interwebs, the position paper from a vendor, our beloved vendor. And this was on their front page. It said that after careful analysis of the RIPE 501 profile, the vendor is expressing its support for the following reasons. It is deployment-oriented, it takes into account the architectures that have been validated by experience, and so on and so forth. So, but there was a but at the end. And they claimed that they were not adequately involved in the process of creation of the profile. That was to be expected at the end. And they put in the position paper that they expect to be more involved in the next version of the document. Why not? They made some good suggestions, but at the end, I told them, every vendor can do the suggestions, but at the end, they are verified and validated in the community. If the community thinks this is not a good suggestion or is biased, it does not go into the document. Okay. So we have more text description and explanations. There is only one way to comply, or you require IPv6 Ready Logo certification, or the long list of RFCs, or IPv6 Ready Logo. And if you require something that has the asterisk at the end, that does not have the asterisk at the end, you say IPv6 logo plus this RFC. Now we go into some details. Because I'm a bit lazy, I just used the slides from RIPE-63 in Vienna that we presented. What was the global changes? I can go straight to the important part. Well, yes, we added some extra optional requirements that are quite cool. MLD was fixed, so we added mobile node. Okay, IPsec. IPsec is a big thing because it was moved from mandatory to optional to mandatory, or how to say, well, in RFC that specifies the IPv6 node requirements, it was moved from must to should to must to should. Why? Because now it is should IPsec in IPv6, because some constraints small devices like sensors has no enough memory and hardware capability to build in the full IPv6 stack. So with a must, these small sensors and small devices would be ruled out as IPv6 compliant devices. And the RFC specifically says that you should demand IPv6, IPsec in IPv6, unless really, really necessary for these devices. So our interpretation, must in RFC means mandatory in our document. Should in RFC does not mean optional. So should can be mandatory or optional. I'm confusing you. So IPsec is not optional, but also not mandatory. How about that? So at the end, the community decided that IPsec is included as optional in this document with an explicit statement. Organizations that use IPsec or expect to use it in the future should move it from optional to mandatory when initiating the tender. And remember, this document is a template. You are supposed to adjust it to your own need. Now, where we are heading forward with this document, the European Commission took it as a template to create a generic European IPv6 profile. We are coming to an end with this project as a part of Gen 6 project. This is one of the deliverables directly to the European Commission. When it will be public, I can share it and point to some URLs. So this will be governmental IPv6 profile based on RIPE-NCC. And my recommendation is go on the web, find it, have a look. If you like it, use it, take it to your procurement people and say, we need this. And with this, here are all three authors of RIPE-NCC in a pub in Amsterdam during one RIPE meeting. I don't know how we just sat together and one took the picture. There are our email addresses. If you have any question, you can ask them now or send them to any of these emails. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. Are there any questions for Jan regarding RIPE-554, RIPE-501, or the EU profile, or the work of the Go6 Institute? No? Okay.
Do I need to go down to my place and ask myself a question?
But you want to ask yourself a question, no? Go ahead.
I have lots of questions to myself.
Okay,
I will solve it.
It's the big thing is, do you also have the answers?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
Now, thank you, Jan. And
thank you.
As an example of one of the things that was produced by the RIPE IPv6 working group, is this document. So comments are also welcome on that list. Thank you, Jan.